Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Matt. It's a joy to be here.
You are talking to us from Napa, right?
That's right. I am in the hills in sort of a remote area of Napa County, above the valley.
You know, what I like to do is state what's going on today and then dig back into your history. So what's the state of the state for you? Like, what do you consider yourself? What's the studio called? And what does the day-to-day look like for you?
Well, I mean, I guess I in different times wear one or several of the three hats, either engineering, mixing, or producing. My studio is Boxer Lodge. It is located in a section of my house that I ripped off about 5 years ago and built to be a dedicated recording studio. Day to day is. It's kind of a wonderful blend because oftentimes it's engineering sessions that will run several days. As I mentioned, we're in rural, a little bit remote, up above Napa Valley. So oftentimes when people come here, they stay here with me. I've got a number of guest rooms. I've got a guest cottage out back, which is kind of nice. I've got a pool, so, people like that. And so I'll have multi-day sessions where I'm immersed in it. You know how joyful but also taxing that can be to be kind of go, go, go when you're trying to get a record done. That's interspersed with other stuff, mixing gigs. Right now it's about 50-50 where I spend about half my time either engineering or producing and the other half mixing.
How many people can you accommodate for lodging?
We have 3 bedrooms in the house and the guest cottage out back, so we could comfortably put 4 people, each having their own room. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, for the younger people we get in, if it overflows, we've got couches and aero beds.
For the younger people specifically, because us older people don't like sleeping on couches.
No, our backs don't do as well with it.
You read my mind. I was like, yeah, it really boils down to the back at this age. Let's get into the past and lead up to this. I know that you come from being a drummer, but before we get into that, where were you raised? Where'd you grow up?
Was born in just outside of Boston, and then spent most of my teen years in Seattle. Back to Boston for college, and then to California.
What did you study in college?
Went to college to become an electrical engineer because that's what my father did, and I didn't know any better. Wanted to be an audio engineer, so I quit and to play music and tried to get a job. I was in Seattle at this point. This was college number 1, and scoured all of Seattle trying to get a gig as an assistant in a studio, because back then that was the only way to get into the game. We didn't have, there was no GarageBand. There was no, this was before Pro Tools was readily available. I failed. I ended up working manual labor jobs and did end up deciding that going to college and getting a degree was beat digging ditches in, rainy Seattle. So I went back and got a degree in computer science, and that started me off down a tech path for a number of years.
As you were in college and you were studying computer science, were you angling to do that kind of work post-college, or were you still thinking, I want to be an audio engineer?
I had kind of given up. The money was good, and so I went all in on tech. Ended up in working in the South Bay. I was living in San Francisco, but working in San Jose area. Did that for a good long time, but I continued to play drums, that is. And then as soon as it became viable, really viable to start doing digital recording with like the Digi-01, I got into recording at that point. So that was about 2000 when I, start dipping my toes into recording.
So that's interesting. So your tech years preceded the year 2000.
Yeah, well, I'm not young. So yeah, no, I graduated college in 1989. I was doing just pure tech for 11 years and drumming.
What kind of tech jobs were those back then?
I was doing low-level stuff, designing software that ran inside the operating system that communicated with hardware for big data centers.
That was pre-internet, right?
Technically, no. I mean, I was in networking, and so, the internet was ARPANET. That goes into the 70s. That's a real diversion. But, that goes as far back as the thing with the government and colleges to connect devices. But we know of it as like the World Wide Web. That was after I started in tech.
Yeah, I bring it up just as a differentiation because the tech world of the we'll call it pre-internet boom, is a different animal than the post-internet tech boom. Would you agree?
Oh, it totally is.
So you are living in San Francisco, you're commuting to the South Bay, you're getting into recording. What was your first professional interaction with audio and music?
So I got into it, as I say, around 2000. I had what my friend dubbed the Craftphonic mobile recordifier, which was a box. I had one of those. I had a Digi 002. I had the 8-channel interface. So I had one of those PreSonus converters and a couple of other affordable items in this rack, and I would take it around to rehearsal spaces and record bands. Not long after that, I built my first studio in the basement of my house in San Francisco, which was a very modest studio. I had some nice gear, but the space was very small. I mean, it was a project space. But I managed to record a number of records, put out a number of records from back then. By today's standards, quality is compromised, but I'm proud of them. And you got to cut your teeth somewhere.
When you're taking that 002 PreSonus rig around to rehearsal spaces, what are the things you were learning at that time about the process of recording and the process of dealing with people?
Yeah, well, people's half of it. I don't know if it's a learning thing, but the one thing that I guess I've always felt in terms of the people aspect is, so I'm a drummer, at least historically. I'm a somewhat retired drummer now, but I've never been a songwriter, and I've always kind of had this reverence, this awe of songwriters, because to me it's, that is the ultimate magic trick. Out of nothing, you're conjuring this thing that can make people laugh or cry or dance or whatever, and it just comes out of the ether. So from very early on, the notion of recording was always a little terrifying to me, and still is, because I consider these songs, these magical creations, to be like so valuable, and oftentimes they're reflective of some very deep feeling that the songwriter has, some deep meaning, whether it's about someone they love or someone they've lost. And so to be entrusted with either recording it or producing it or mixing it, to me is, it's an honor, but it's also like, I've always likened it to like having somebody drop their baby off a balcony from a burning building, and it's your job to catch it, so you really don't want to screw this up. I mean, I think I've always felt that way, but I think going back to early days of recording, I think it's, you learn how to inspire that confidence, to inspire people to let their baby go, from the balcony.
I'll catch your baby.
Yeah. If you don't know how to communicate with somebody, they're going to be pretty nervous to let go of that baby.
Are you equating the catching of the baby to the capturing of the song?
The capturing of the song, there's all the technical stuff, right? Don't go into the red. Don't overcompress it on the way in. Don't screw up the EQ. Use the right mics. Et cetera. That stuff is, I think, relatively straightforward. The bigger challenge, I think, for me is getting the vibe right, knowing what to do in the recording process, or especially in the production process or in the mixing process, to set a stage. Do you want the audio equivalent of sepia tone on this, right? To fully realize the artist's vision.
Is there any lessons from the tech sector that you brought to the world of recording that you learned?
I mean, from a technical standpoint, yes, all the time, because I was fine-tuning the performance of software. So I was very keen to issues surrounding latency, and I could tell you how many nanoseconds it takes to get across the the interconnect between two processors. I was working at that level. So when you're dealing in audio and you're trying to debug phase issues at 96 kilohertz or whatever, it's kind of useful to know, like, well, okay, how many samples does that put something out of phase at 7 kilohertz or something like that. So you can understanding things at that level comes in handy. From the perspective of, say, interpersonal stuff, it's a professional environment. Anytime you're working in an environment, and I think this would be true of any job really, you learn how to collaborate with people in a hopefully productive way, not a way that makes people confrontational, but makes people feel like you have a good collaborative relationship.
On the technological side of things that you learned in the tech industry, did it make your foray into audio an easier one to understand, from whether it be signal flow or how, audio travels from device to device?
My original intent was to be an electrical engineer. That probably would have been more useful. You talk to me about differences of impedance settings or whatever, and I'm like, I could turn the knob and say, I think I like that sound better than that sound, but
and not to go down a tangent here, but I will say that my experience in audio helps me understand other things in the world, like plumbing, a little better.
Oh, sure.
And troubleshooting and trying to, I had, our garbage disposal went out, and I was like, oh my God, I don't want to have to call a plumber and $600 later. So we just quickly ordered a new one for $100 off of the Costco website. It showed up. I watched a YouTube video and I was like, oh, I totally get this. I can do this.
You're a better man than me. Every time I try plumbing, I end up with water everywhere.
That's why I always like to ask on how, people's day gigs that they had at one point in their life, how that contributed to their audio life. And I think it's somewhat circular how the audio then can, I guess, influence, your outside audio world. Tell me about setting up a studio in your home in San Francisco. And did you have anybody that was influencing you or mentoring you in any way? Or was it all self-discovery?
Well, I had friends that helped me, which I am forever grateful for. But no, that was everything was self-taught back then related to audio. It's a different world now, and it's such a much better world in a lot of ways, because this was before we really, we had YouTube videos.
Mm-hmm.
And so the process of both learning how to be an audio engineer as well as build a recording studio was all books. The books worked really well for building recording studio. Think about building a studio in your house in San Francisco. I was fortunate enough to have a house in San Francisco, but it, like all houses in San Francisco, it was right next to the building next to me. So if you wanted to play drums in your house, in San Francisco, you needed to build a bunker. So I did the full staggered stud construction, and then a room within a room, and all of the techniques, the resilient channel to mount the drywall on, double layers of drywall, all the tricks, not for sound treatment, but for sound isolation.
Did it work?
It was unbelievable. You could set a bomb off inside that thing, and you wouldn't know outside.
That lesson or those lessons learned there would come to benefit you later on with Boxer Lodge.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, tell me about the studio in San Francisco more in terms of what year was that and what gear were you using?
I probably finished construction around 2002. Gear evolved. I was purely in the box with a little controller. I had a few nice pieces. I had, early on, I bought some Brent Averill racked Neve 1272s and some Calrec stuff. I got an LA2A pretty quickly, and one of the 6176 Universal Audio 610 1176 in a single unit, channel strip kind of things. I'm trying to remember, we had, other stuff. I had a bunch of cheap stuff too. My brother-in-law, who just recently retired, was at the time a restoration mastering engineer for Sony at Battery Studios in New York, and the recording aspect of Battery Studios had shut down, and I was very fortunate. He got me on the auction for the battery studio. So I actually got a Rev D 1176. I got a Rev F 1176. I got a AKG C12, things that today are, like coveted, and they were coveted then, but, not like they are today. So I had some good items, still do.
Who were your clients then?
Mostly friends.
Okay.
And actually, almost without exception, friends. Because this was, nights and evenings, right? I wasn't, at that point, it wasn't my primary gig as it is now.
Tell me about leaving San Francisco, because I'm assuming you sold the house in San Francisco.
Yeah.
I'm sure it appreciated in value tremendously. Did you end up having to dismantle the studio before selling it?
No. We joked about that because, our house was in the Castro, and, you have a soundproof room in the basement of your house. It's in the Castro, San Francisco. We have a joke like, I wonder how that room is being used today. The route was, it's kind of a funny story. I mean, it was around about 2010. We loved living in San Francisco, but we were really, really getting sick of fog, especially in the summer. We were sick of being cold. And that was around the time that there was a big housing market dive. Life in tech was going reasonably well, so we had the money to buy just a weekend getaway home. Mm-hmm. And so we found this place we're above St. Helena and above Napa Valley. And we found this place about 15 minutes up the hill from St. Helena. It was in rough shape. It was a short sale. We were like the last line before it went into foreclosure. But the bones of the house were good. And so we bought it and we just started working on it. But we stayed in San Francisco. But we started spending increasing amounts of time up here because we just kind of found ourselves really enjoying it up here.
And I do want to mention, just for those who don't live in the Bay Area, so distance between San Francisco and Napa, would you estimate that's about an hour and a half-ish?
Yeah, an hour and a half to 2, depending on traffic.
Okay.
So we spent gradually more and more time up here, which meant I was spending less time in my studio there and really lamenting it. I kind of floated this idea when we were on vacation. I floated this idea of, gee, how crazy would it be to build a recording studio in the Napa house in what is basically the middle of nowhere? I was like, this is insanity. Who's gonna travel that far to make a record? But my wife, who's been unfailingly supportive at every turn, convinced me to do it. About 6 years ago, I took what was the garage and the kitchen pantry and completely dismantled it. This time I had professional help. One of the neighbors up here, weirdly and coincidentally, had built Phil Lesch's studio and Boz Scaggs' studio. And he's just one of my neighbors.
Wow, what a coincidence.
It was nuts. When he told me that, I was like, will you help me? He says, yeah, so he charged me time and materials. Great guy. And we took the, there was a drop ceiling, took that up to the roof line. So I got really, really high ceiling, pretty sizable. I mean, it's not Ocean Way, but I have a good size live room, a good control room for mixing. It can get a little tight with when you get 4 or 5 people all in the control room, but it works pretty well.
Did you envision a destination type recording situation for people? Is that why you factored in the lodging?
Yeah, and I've actually always loved that. I mean, you go back to like Exile, right? The Stones' Exile, right? Let's make our record in a chateau. Okay, so this isn't a chateau. I'll grant you that, but it does, as I say, I've got I got a pool out there. I got a bocce court out there. There's an outdoor table, and there's kind of a spirit to the whole experience. It's hard to explain to people who are coming. Because I think people are used to being able to just kind of say, well, if we need food, we'll just pop out, grab a burrito, and come back. Well, no, you got to go to St. Helena if you want food. So it's kind of like going to an Airbnb in the mountains. People bring food. I buy food. We record all day, and then we prepare a big dinner and hang around the table, and have a glass of wine, and big table full of people telling stories, and then what's really nice about it is then a bunch of us get in the hot tub after or something like that, and then the next morning people get up, they grab their cup of coffee, and they wander into the live room in their slippers and start playing, or start singing, and you don't have that stress of driving to the studio.
My understanding of the Exile on Main Street sessions is that they were actually in the basement of the chateau, which was really hot. And,
right.
Which is unusual because you'd think a basement would be cooler, but apparently got really hot, and the recording truck was outside. To my understanding, it was kind of semi-miserable. Yours doesn't sound miserable.
No, it's a pretty comfortable space.
It's such a cool thing. I mean, I could tell you that, and I know that we have Mixed with the Masters experience in common.
Yeah.
And I know that, you've been to La Fabrique.
I have, yeah.
And that communal sitting around the table eating together, there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, it's some of my fondest memories is doing that.
Just the camaraderie that's built, and when you eat with people in that setting and drink wine and do the whole thing, it can really, really be fun. And I would argue that it's probably a better bonding moment for a band at a studio than everybody going out to, hey, let's go down the street and grab a burrito. It's
a tremendously bonding experience. And I mean, I recorded this band, Noel and the Deserters, last year. Great Bay Area country band. We were doing some of the tracking at Christmas. We were doing keyboard overdubs. I think this was the week before Christmas, and the keyboard player was a really entertaining guy. And we ended up, we had dinner, and then after dinner we were, having drinks, having a little bit of dessert, and then he went over. We have, in addition to the live room, I've got a baby grand piano in the living room of the living part of the house, but I've got it wired through so I can record people playing that. We're all in the living room / dining, big main room area, and he goes over the piano and starts singing or playing Christmas carols. Then everybody gathers around the piano to sing Christmas carols. And then my dog started joining in on the Christmas carols, which was kind of funny. But it really is just this incredible camaraderie and good memories.
How do you vet people to come up there? Like, how do you avoid having experiences where somebody shows up and you're like, oh shit, I'm with this person for 3 days and they're staying here?
Well, first off, almost to a person, everybody I record comes word of mouth. So there's that. I think I remember John Vanderslice saying this first, that he says, almost everybody I know that plays music, with very few exceptions, they're just good people. And that's been my experience.
That would be my experience too. I could probably count on one hand the negative experiences out of, almost 30 years. So we're very fortunate in that we're in that position that we've had great clients.
You get this chain reaction thing that happens too. I've been unbelievably fortunate to work with the level of talent that I've worked with. I had Jim Bogus in last week, who, as you know, is like, I mean, this guy's been on stage with Keith Richards. He's like a super heavy duty drummer. I get really good session players in here a lot of the times. So then they ended up getting called to do another session, and they, someone says, hey, if you're looking to record a place, I know this cool place, and you get that sort of chain game of telephone or something that sort of expands.
How long did the process take, and were there any permitting issues?
Well, the process was, because I had such good help, went relatively quickly. I think it was 6 months total construction time. And, and then of course you spend, it's never done. You're always soldering a new patch bay in and expanding somehow, but yeah, it was 6 months completion.
And then how did you make the decision about like what's going to be the workflow, what's going to be the gear choices?
That's a good question. I mean, it's always kind of evolved. It's, as you could see behind me, it's the main center of this is API 1608, which I got based on a recommendation. And then thanks to you, I expanded it. You knew someone that was selling the expander, so I got that. I added that. But, you mentioned mix with the masters. I study all those guys, both through video series, but also in person, see what they're using, see what other guys are using. And then it's trial and error. I mean, sometimes you get stuff and you realize after a while that, maybe you're not gravitating towards it. It's like, maybe I don't want to use that compressor on this project, and you use it. Some stuff you just like, no, this is going to sound great with this, and some stuff you end up not using, so you get rid of it and get something else.
An audience, just, in full transparency. So we were at my favorite bar at NAMM at the Clarion, and Scott Evans, who's been on the show a couple times, I knew had bought an API, basically what you have. He had a 32-channel API, and he was like, hey, man, do you know anybody that needs an expander? And I was like, oh, my God, how are you going to find somebody to buy that? And one thing led to another, and I was like, Peter, what do you think about getting, 16 more channels? And that deal worked out really great. So
yeah, brilliant.
When it comes to pricing the studio, is it a challenge now? And if not, was it a challenge in the beginning?
I mean, it's always a challenge, I think. I'm fortunate. There's no question. You mentioned, do I still own the San Francisco house? And the answer is, I'll back up just a little bit because it'll explain things a little clearer. Housing prices kind of peaked about 3 years ago. Doing audio has been a dream of mine. Being an audio engineer has been a dream of mine, literally since I was probably 13. I realized, having spent all those years in tech, that, about 4 years ago, I was like, if I'm ever going to do this, if I'm ever going to live this dream that I've had my entire life, I better get on it. I left my tech job and sold the house, which, as you noted, had appreciated quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that enabled me to make this career switch. And so, I'm certainly not wealthy, but I did well enough with that I was able to not try and charge top dollar right out of the gate. In fact, I did a lot of pro bono work right at the beginning, and that has helped. That's no longer needs to be the case. I have a steady stream of work coming, but I do also really try my best to keep it as affordable as I can because, as you know, a lot of musicians don't have a lot of money, and particularly a lot of the really, really good ones don't have a lot of money. And I would rather keep my costs low and record the people that are, truly the gems, rather than record like the Intel software engineer that has a side party band or whatever and can pay top dollar. That's less interesting to me.
I totally would agree. There's people out there listening who are not in the position to go full time. Your journey is a lesson in positioning yourself and making decisions so you can be in this position. Now, as you said, you're not a wealthy guy, but you've got enough of a stable foundation to kind of, keep it together. And you didn't go hog wild on a studio. You did what you needed to do to have a legit place, but it's not like you bought the most expensive gear in the world and bought, and built a multi-room facility, et cetera, et cetera. And you didn't get in over your head.
No, well, the gear is fairly substantial, actually. But
I say that as I'm looking. Is that an unfair child?
It is, yeah.
Okay, well that's different than a fair child in terms of pricing.
No, it's not. That's true. Yeah, no, I didn't. I don't have a $300,000 real Fairchild behind me. That would be next level.
I think it's encouraging because I think that you made some careful decisions along the way and were able to piece this together and become a part of the larger scene here in Northern California.
It is a constant state of evolution, both from the perspective of gear, as we talked about earlier, of just moving stuff in and out. And I reinvest most of what I make back into the studio to try and continually improve it. Also, just gear aside, I've always been enamored with scenes. I came out of my timing was terrible, but I left Seattle right before Seattle broke. The whole grunge years broke, and went back to Boston right after. Boston had sort of a heyday in the 80s with bands like, like Till Tuesday and Dinosaur Jr. and, a bunch of bands like this. And, I kind of came in on the tail end of that. So my timing was terrible. But I've always loved the notion of scenes, whether it's Seattle or in its day, or the stuff around CBGBs in New York, or the Minneapolis scene with the Replacements, and to me that sort of cultivation, Laurel Canyon. I mean, there's a tremendous scene, and I like to think, and partly this I think goes to the word of mouth thing. I'd like to think that maybe that what I've got going here is at least a part of a scene that's happening in the Bay Area, particularly among the Americana artists. And there's nothing that makes me happier than to see, and if I can, facilitate cross-pollination among great artists and great musicians. You need a bass player. I know the guy. Or have a bill put together for a show. That's to be able to facilitate stuff like that. I think it's great.
And I want to be clear here with my audience, because I don't think, like you said, you really kind of went full time 4 or 5 years ago, but in reality, you've actually been working on it for a hell of a lot longer than that, just not full time.
25 years I've been at it.
I think I want to once again encourage members of my audience who are not doing it full time, because there's many people who maintain day gigs and still do it, and to me that doesn't make you any less professional, those who have day gigs. Just because you have a safety net, in fact, I kind of think that makes you a little smarter sometimes to do it that way. I find the fact that you stayed on the path but kept the day gig until it made sense was a majorly smart move, because now you can kind of write out for the foreseeable future a career that you can really put your entire focus into.
Yeah, I think that's true. And there are no shortage of, tech guys who built vanity studios, right? Mm-hmm. I don't consider myself that, because it's very much a working studio, and I'm at it 80 hours a week. This isn't just a thing like that. But I think that there are people that could perceive it that way. But the flip side of it is that if you had, as I had, a relatively good paying career, and are able to afford to have an API console or an Unfairchild or whatever, and be able to offer services to some of these Bay Area artists that don't have a lot of money, partly because you had that career. I think there's value there. I think there's something to be said for that as a viable career path or a viable business path. And
there's plenty of room for everybody.
Yeah, I think so. The flip side is also I live in awe of the people that started, I had a 4-track cassette thing and built my way up to where I am today from that, and that's doing nothing but that. And I think that's hats off to those people, because that's amazing.
Because you've managed the money right along the way. I think that you might even have a little bit more objectivity about this than others. So knowing what you know, the experiences you've been through, when it comes to money, what would your advice be to up-and-coming engineers in terms of where to put your focus, where to think about, like, not overbuying, but maybe buying the right gear at the right time, and also managing your money day to day? Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you have any experience that you feel others could benefit from?
Well, gear-wise, starting there, I would say that if you buy good stuff, it's parked money or better. I mean, as I mentioned, I was fortunate enough to get a C12 in around 2002. That's worth a lot of money today. I also, in 2002, bought a lot of cheap microphones. They're worth zero today. If you can afford it, get good gear, because in the long run, you'll get back what you paid for it. There's so much that goes into this job financially. Everything from, what's it going to cost to maintain the equipment? What's it going to do to your power bill? There's a lot to it. If you're going to be that guy that I was talking about that starts, with the four channel cassette deck and works his way from nothing up doing nothing but audio by just living hand to mouth, you got to pay attention to all those things.
Yeah, your mention of the power bill brings up kind of one of those gotcha things where, well, it just seems like, I don't know about you, I know here in California, but it just seems like our power bills just are out of control. I think it felt like we were going, on the average, like $500 to $600 a month. And now it just seems like it's like $1,000 a month. Those are one of the unforeseen things. The other unforeseen thing is, as I'm sure you've experienced, when you buy a console or any piece of gear, you're not just buying the gear. You've got to buy all the infrastructure to support it, meaning cabling,
Right.
racks, insurance, it's not an island to itself.
On the power front, because I am a firm believer that power bills only go one direction, my entire roof is covered in solar panels. And so I can largely power my studio just off of the sun, which is really nice. Going back to your other question, it just occurred to me is that the one overlooked expense is time. And that's something where I'm probably not particularly good at, but I appreciate the fact that I think a lot of people mix in the box these days for time reasons. Even if you're a person like myself that actually still loves to mix through a console, it's a time suck because then you got to print stems and, hopefully not have to do recalls, but, stuff like that. So you have to factor in your workflow into your finances as well.
Yeah, that's true. Because one could get enamored by the workflow of a console, but forget that, modern practices dictate that, I'm going to have to do stems and I'm going to have to do recalls. And you got to have a method to do the recall that is effective and time efficient. It all takes some thinking through the process and not just, anybody can gather money and buy gear, but to put that gear into practice, into a workflow that makes sense, that helps the artist in the end, that's part of the practice of it is figuring that out. It's interesting you mentioned, like, I've known plenty of tech people who get into this. Very few, and you're one of the very few who actually dig into the practice and become the engineer. There's many who, as you say, they have vanity studios and it's a toy. It's a toy to some. It's not a toy to you. There's something you wanted to do this since you were a kid.
Oh, you have to love it. I mean, because you know how much work it is. I mean, it's especially you get a session going. You're going 12, 14-hour days, multiple days in a row. Sometimes it goes great, sometimes it doesn't. And I think there's a segment of people for whom it is a vanity project that they have an idea of what they're getting into, and then once they get into it, they realize that it's a lot harder than what they thought. And you don't do this unless you have a deep, deep love of creating good music.
Yeah, or even if you're not in music and you're in film or some other aspect of it, like you have a deep, deep love of dealing with audio.
Yeah.
Do you think you can quantify what attracts you to this type of gig?
I guess it's two things. Literally, one of my very, very earliest memories is of my father hooking up. Remember the old Klipschorn speakers that used to sit in the corner?
Mm-hmm.
And he hooked one of those up, and it was the first time I had ever heard, like, the full frequency spectrum. And I was gobsmacked. I mean, it was just like, what is this magical sound that I'm hearing? It's just marvelous, And I think I was probably 6 or something like that. And it left a deep imprint on me. That sonic, going to an audiophile stereo store and having them put on Dark Side of the Moon, and, the saxophone, like the speakers are, 12 feet apart from each other, and 10 feet back, and the saxophone is like suspended in air in front of me, and I'm like, how, doing this, like, how is this possible,
Right, so trying to reach out and touch it.
Yeah. So, so that part has always been a big part, but then equally, if not more so for me, is, as I mentioned, just the ability to work with singers and songwriters and musicians who I adore. I mean, I listen to some of my favorite songs, and I listen to music constantly, as I'm sure most of your guests do. And some of my favorite songs are, many of my favorite songs are by people that I know. And to have a hand in bringing some of those to life, it's rewarding beyond, I mean, not to get too cheesy about it, but it's unbelievably rewarding experience to be able to do that.
I would argue, and tell me if you think I'm wrong. I would say that your time spent in tech and that desire to be more deeply involved over the years has given you an appreciation and a reverence that you're so happy to be here at this moment doing this, that some people have grown jaded and it's just like old hat to them, but you sound like someone who still has the love and the passion for it.
Oh, I pinch myself. I get out of bed every day and I get to come in here. I mean, how great is that? Right?
It is really great. Yeah, it's such a great feeling, and I have to admit that I probably would have gotten a lot more jaded long ago if it had not been for my show, because you get to talk to people all the time, and like this conversation just kind of, it reinvigorates every time I do it. I'm just like, right, this is why I do this.
Yeah.
We all dig this, and the excitement is palpable as I talk to different guests. So, well, we're about out of time. So for the audience, I'm going to direct you to boxerlodge.com. That'll be in the show notes. Please check it out. It's really cool. You can check out the pictures and just kind of get a written version of what we've essentially talked about here, and some cool pictures. I know we've talked about me coming up there. I do need to come up there and just spend a couple days and just hang out and geek out with you. Maybe somehow we can, piece it together into a mutual project that we can both be involved in. But
I'd love that.
Yeah, that would be super fun.
Yeah, it'd be super fun.
Plus, I'd love to just sit around a table with a group of people and drink wine and eat food.
You got to do it, man. You got to come up. We'll put you in the guest cottage.
I'm all for that. Just get a little vacation. Well, super cool, man. I really appreciate it. It's great to have you. So thanks again.
Well, it's been an honor to be one of your guests. You got big heavy hitters on here, so I'm humbled to join you.
Welcome to the party.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt.
All right. Take care.